Welcome back to Knitting Lessons, where we are knitting the Lempi sweater by Novita. It's meant to be in, I don't know how you say this word, Hygge, I don't know, wool. But I'm making mine in the Millimia Sweden naturally soft, super chunky wool, which is really soft, it's lovely. So far what we've done, if you look back on the last video, is we've created the body up to the armpits, and now we're going to make the sleeves. So when we make the sleeves on this, it's a slightly different technique. We are using double pointed needles. Now, we can use circular needles if you've only got circular needles, and you can use a technique called the magic loop, which helps you to make sure you're knitting and it's tight enough. Because the problem we have when we knit on the round with really, really small circles like a wrist is that actually the kind of loop needles, they're often a bit too big, and you can get ladders in your knitting and it can just look a bit saggy and rubbish. So double pointed needles are better for when you've got something small that you're knitting. But if you only have the circular needles, if you know you don't get on with double pointed needles knitting in the round, then you can go and have a look at videos of the magic loop technique, which I really struggle with. I much prefer double pointed needles. If you'd like to learn how to use double pointed needles, then stick with me and we'll do it today. So let me get my 8mm double pointed needles out of the packet. I try and keep the packets because usually double pointed needles don't say on them what size the needles are. I think these ones do because they're so big. Yeah, they do. So that's much more helpful. The thinner ones often don't say what they are, which is really irritating. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 needles. So what that means is that we will be knitting kind of in a triangle like this, if I can get them to stop rolling away. And this will be our knitting needle. So our stitches will go around this triangle and we'll be using one of them to knit with. So I'm making size small, which is the second one within the brackets. So for me, I need to cast on 34 stitches. Now if I can, I'm going to put all 34 on. Sorry about the dog barking. I'll wait for him to stop. If I can, sorry for the dog barking interlude. If I can, I was saying I'm going to put all 34 stitches on one needle. So using the 8mm double pointed needles, cast on 34 for me stitches. Remember, you probably need quite a long tail with this chunky yarn. We're doing 34. Ta-da! 34 stitches on my needle. So what I need to do is I need to distribute my stitches evenly between my 3 needles, remembering to leave this one here, I'll move the 10 mils out of the way, leaving this one here free for knitting with. So for me, because I have, where am I looking, 34 stitches, then I need to say do 11 on 2 needles and 12 on 1 needle. That makes sense. So just starting from one end, I'll do transferring them over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and I'll make this needle the one with 12 on, and then my other needle, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And then just checking 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11. There we go. So again, being really careful that I don't twist my stitches, what I need to do is I need to flip them over. So remember, we always want the tail of our knitting to be here because we're knitting across this is the beginning of our row. So that was the end of our last row. This is the beginning of our next row. So I'm going to lay out my needles on the table so I know that all the bumps are underneath here and I haven't got any twisting, because again, like with knitting on the round, if there was a twist, it would kind of become a bit of an infinity twist. It wouldn't go away. And it's quite helpful to do this on a table initially, just to make sure that everything is laid out nicely. So you come to your first needle and what does it say? So it says place marker for the beginning of the round. Now I find that with this I'm not very good at placing a marker. So how I'm going to remember this is the beginning of my round is that I'll see the tail and it will be between two needles. So this is how I know that it's the beginning of the round. As soon as I get to the end, between two needles and the tail is directly below me, that's how I'll know. If you do know a way to do this with circular knitting on double pointed needles, please do let me know, because I've struggled with this for years and I've always just had to basically use logic to work out where the beginning of my row is. So I'd really appreciate any tips or ideas. So it says, place marker being around, work ribbing in the round for 5 centimetres. Work ribbing in the round. So if we look back at our beginning, our ribbing was knit 1 and purl 1. So that's all we'll do. So again, checking it's not twisted. No, we're all good. I'm going to knit 1 here. Now when you go between needles, it's really important that you just give it a bit more tension, because otherwise you can get a bit of bagginess here and it kind of looks a bit like a looser stitch, a ladder. So knit 1 and purl 1. You don't have to pull it tight all the way, just that first stitch as you go across the needles. And remember, it's always really awkward, that first row, and that's why I like to do it just here on the table if you're a beginner, or using your lap if you're sat down, because you just got so many needles to contend with. Knit 1 and purl 1. And it does get easier as you've got a bit of fabric at the bottom of your needles and it becomes clear that you're definitely not twisted. You don't have to pay so much attention. It becomes a lot easier. Just like with everything, this first row is just a bit annoying. Knit 1, purl 1. Okay. So then I turn to my next needle. This one's now freed up, so this becomes my knitting needle. Push it right down to the end, checking it's not twisted, and it's not. My last stitch was a purl, so I need to put my yarn behind to make this next stitch a knit. And then I carry on, remembering to pull that first stitch tighter than you pull the rest of your stitches, just so you get that even tension. There we go. Doing well. Near the end of our first needle, our second needle, sorry. It takes a lot of work to concentrate on knitting and talking at the same time. When I lived with my then boyfriend, now husband, and my best friend all together, there used to be a running joke that I would shout at people if they talked to me when I was counting. Okay, so we finished that needle. This needle now becomes our free needle. We turn to our next one, checking it's not twisted, and it's not. Our last stitch was a knit, so we need to pull the yarn round to the front for a purl. These ones tend to be easier where you go from a knit to a purl. Because the yarn's already there, the tension seems to be a bit better, but I'll still pull it tight just in case. And then knit, and then purl, all the way to the end of this needle. And when I get back to this cast on end, that's how I know I've done one row. There we go, and a pearl. So let me check all my stitches are there. Good. So we've got row 1 done. We're not twisted. There is a bit of a gap here, that's what I'm saying with the bag. So next time you start the next row, it's always natural that with this first one, where you go into our first row, there is a bit of a gap. So just keep making sure you're pulling that first stitch nice and tight when you go across. And you're going to do this until it measures 5 centimetres, just like the bottom. So keep going, doing your rib to 5 centimetres, and I'll see you when we do the rest of the sleeve.